Good evening. Let's see, is this mic working? Yeah. I'm Noel Latif. I'm president of the Foreign Policy Association, and I'm delighted to welcome you for this timely dialogue on Canada-U.S. relations. The border between our two countries has been described as a one-way mirror. Unfortunately, this can cause distortions. I am reminded of the experience shared with us by the former Canadian Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney, when he spoke at the Foreign Policy Association. He said his plane had just landed at JFK, and one of those golf carts was waiting to whisk him to a connecting gate. A fellow passenger asked whether she too might have a lift. The gate agent responded, "Sorry, ma'am, this vehicle is reserved for the former dictator of Canada." In some quarters, I think he was viewed as somewhat authoritarian. We are pleased to be joined this evening by the Honorable Pierre Poilievre, a member of Parliament and leader of the official opposition of Canada, who most recently ran for Prime Minister of Canada. During his time in government, Mr. Poilievre worked on efforts to cut taxes, balance budgets, and advance accountability measures, including leading the Federal Accountability Act through Parliament. His work has focused on issues of affordability, economic opportunity, and government transparency, reflecting his broader vision for a self-reliant Canada. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Poilievre.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Noel. And whenever you say Brian Mulroney's name, a rush of memories come to mind, and many of the stories that he would share about his fond memories he would share of his visits to the United States of America, where he had many friends. And in fact, one of his favorite stories was when he and his finance minister were out dining just outside of Washington after a day of long diplomatic meetings. And they sat down at the dinner table, and the bread came, and then the waiter walked over with the butter, and he handed them each just one stick of butter. And there he was with his finance minister, who said, "Sir, is it possible for me to have another stick of butter?" And he said, "No, I'm under very strict orders. It's hard times. Everyone gets a single stick of butter." And Brian Mulroney said, "Well, do you know who we are? I'm the Prime Minister of Canada, and this is my finance minister. He decides who gets the money." And the waiter said, "Well, I'm the waiter, and I decide who gets the butter." And it was as simple as that, and a good reminder of who's really in charge in this country and in our shared continent, to the people who do the work on the ground, who serve others, and reminds us that we indeed are servants ourselves. And we have some great public servants with us here today. We have the great Roman Baber, Member of Parliament for York Centre, who's joining us. We have my Shadow Minister of International Trade, Adam Chambers, is at the back. We have one of the great rising stars in our parliamentary caucus, an international trade lawyer, someone on whom I rely for great advice all the time, Jacob Mantle from Simcoe North, or from York Durham, sorry. And of course, my Shadow Minister of Canada-U.S. Relations, Shelby Cramp-Nyman. And what an auspicious time for us to be in the United States of America on the 250th anniversary of your Declaration of Independence. But it is another 250th anniversary. It's the quarter millennia celebration of Adam Smith's legendary work, The Wealth of Nations, published also in 1776. This duel, yes, give him a round of applause for Adam Smith, one of the great economists and philosophers of all time. This dual anniversary reminds us of the roots of Western economic freedoms. Free exchange is really the only key to the well-being of both commoners and country. As Smith wrote, commerce ought to naturally be among nations as among individuals a bond of union and friendship. Those words are as true today as when he wrote them a quarter millennium ago. Free markets, free trade, free nations, and free people. The free market has been the single most powerful discovery for the material improvement in living standards, based on the free exchange of work for wages, product for payment, investment for interest. You know, in the 2.5 centuries since this idea was discovered, we have seen a spectacular increase in the quality of life of the human species. We went from having basically 2 millennia of no material improvement, no economic growth whatsoever, no gains in life expectancy, a period of time during which we had effectively sailboats and horseback as our mode of transportation, to a quarter of a millennia later, 250 years later, we've gone to having self-driving cars, jet engines, and spaceships. And annual economic growth has increased 200-fold. Life expectancies have more than doubled, diseases have been cured, and life has materially improved. It works best, this free enterprise system, when it works between countries, between nations like Canada and the U.S. Free trade between our countries have enriched us both. They have been an unqualified success. Yet, paradoxically, ironically, here we are today, clashing with tariffs, harsh words, boycotts, and other disputes. We need a road to repair the relationship and restore reciprocal free trade and security cooperation. And today, that is why I'm here, to make the case for Canada. I will make the case that Canada must be stronger at home, affordable at home, and safe at home so it can be unbreakable abroad. And I will also make the case that all of these things are mutually in the interest of the United States of America. Our two separate countries are always stronger when we work together in friendship. Aujourd'hui, je vais défendre le Canada. Je vais défendre l'idée qu'on a besoin d'un Canada plus fort, plus abordable et plus sécuritaire. C'est comme ça qu'on va vraiment devenir maître chez nous et qu'on aura vraiment un levier de négociation avec nos partenaires américains. The lessons of the past will guide us into the future. And the lesson of this continental history of ours is that our two countries have both been great and reliable allies and friends. Le libre-échange, ça fonctionne. Le libre-échange a toujours enrichi nos deux pays. Nos deux pays ont toujours été des amis et des alliés. Et c'est pourquoi on doit trouver des solutions pour réparer les relations historiques entre nos deux pays. On doit continuer de travailler ensemble afin d'augmenter les échanges et assurer la sécurité de notre continent. We know the history that we share between us, but too often we've taken it for granted. So I'm just going to take a quick moment to remind us the very special thing that we have built together. We fought side by side in the trenches of France and Belgium. The U.S. War Department estimates that there were approximately 30,000 Americans who joined the Canadian Expeditionary Force to fight in World War I before the U.S. joined that war. We, as Canadians, were in World War II 2 years before the United States, and we declared war on Japan earlier in the day than you did after the attacks on Pearl Harbor, just to show how synchronized we are in our shared effort to defend the two countries. In addition to over 1 million Canadians who fought in Europe and North Africa, about 10,000 Canadians fought in the Pacific Theater, including to defend Hong Kong and your very own Aleutian Islands. A decade later, we joined with you. 26,000 Canadian troops went and fought to defeat communism in Korea under American leadership, 500 of whom gave their lives for freedom in a faraway peninsula. Around the same time, our countries established NORAD, an alliance to extend joint air defenses across North America, right up to the Arctic shores of Alaska and the Canadian North. Today, NORAD remains a model of successful military cooperation. After 9/11, there were 225 American aircraft that had emergency landings in Canada. where 33,000 stranded people were granted and cared for, given warm Canadian hospitality. And then 40,000 Canadian soldiers leapt into action to fight and avenge for America against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, following your invocation, the only ever invocation of Article 5 of NATO's Charter. In fact, 158 brilliant Canadians gave their lives in that effort. And let's be clear, Canadians did not just show up in Afghanistan. We went to the most dangerous parts of that country. We went to Kandahar, to Panjwai district. We drove, our young men and women drove over improvised explosive devices, and we took on the nastiest and meanest terrorists anywhere on planet Earth. In fact, your elite special forces said that our JTF-2, the equivalent, was the first choice in their arsenal for any direct action. Thank you. And in 1954, we brought this partnership into economic infrastructure. We jointly built the new Seaway, effectively an H2O highway that went all the way from Thunder Bay and Duluth to France. This was an engineering masterclass, perhaps possibly unprecedented anywhere in the world, a feat of engineering and diplomacy that has perhaps never been matched by any two countries elsewhere. Our relationship is a two-way one. On top of the military and economic facts, there's the countless examples of the way we keep our people fed, safe, and comfortable. Even if they don't grab headlines, there are many things that are not sexy about the work we do together, but it makes our lives possible. For example, we jointly fight fires together. When Los Angeles was going up in flames recently, it was Canadian water bombers that were dousing those flames, scooping up waters from the Pacific and dumping them on the fire. Our RCMP and Coast Guard, your Coast Guard, our RCMP, they literally get on the same ships to patrol the Great Lakes. Our officers intermingle with yours with the common goal of securing our countries against smuggling and trafficking. Dans les dernières années, Hydro-Québec, une grande fierté des Québécois, et l'État de New York ont conclu une entente importante, une entente à long terme sur l'échange d'électricité. C'est la preuve que quand on travaille ensemble, nos deux pays peuvent avancer et prospérer. Closer to home, for most of you in this room, we have long-term electricity agreements where Quebec sells its surplus electricity into the New York market, powering your industries, and so that the lights come on when you flip the switch. These are the kinds of practical things that make us better off on both sides of the border. And this summer, of course, our two countries, along with Mexico, will be co-hosting the world's biggest and most watched sporting event, the World Cup, where we all expect Canada to win. It'll be a little different than the last hockey game we have, but it's too soon to talk about that, isn't it? I see Roman's putting his head down. He's still hurting, but all in good fun. You know, as President Kennedy said, President Kennedy addressed our parliament, and he said, geography made us neighbors. History made us friends. Economics made us partners, and necessity made us allies. Those whom nature hath so joined together, let no man put asunder. So what has then gone wrong if the relationship is so solid and practical? Well, I think we have to go backwards in time to see how we got here. Just 10 years after the power of Western capitalism had buried rusted-out Soviet communism, we provided a new opening for an authoritarian powerhouse to quietly and rapidly sneak up on us. Beijing's communist regime was able to pursue economic enrichment without the corresponding political liberalization that the West had expected. And then one day, the West woke up, and we found that much of our industrial heartlands had been hollowed out, and regions were collapsing from job outsourcing. Our economies were reliant on a country that was, at best, a serious rival, and at worst, a hostile threat. Now, I seek no fight with China or its people, who constitute a brilliant and extraordinary civilization. In fact, if we're being honest with ourselves, China and its people have been outworking, outsmarting, and out-hustling us in the West for the last 30 years. This is a country that went from having 80% of its people living on less than $1 a day to being the second biggest economy in the world in 50 years. It has never happened. But China's rise has come at a serious cost to political and economic freedom in the world. And too often, Western countries and corporate interests have enabled it, sometimes naively, sometimes cynically. We, Canada and the United States, cannot afford to continue to ignore the ways in which Beijing's communist regime has used its growing economic power to threaten our vital interests. President Trump's efforts to prepare and protect the United States from this growing challenger, which is a regime, by the way, that our own Prime Minister in Canada called the single biggest threat to Canada, is fully founded. Canada, however, should be seen as a friend and not a foe in that effort. Instead of treating each other as rivals, Canada and the U.S. should look at the big picture. The real threats to our economies and to our security come not from each other, but from Beijing, from Moscow, from Tehran, and from their proxies. Instead of fighting tariff wars with each other, Canada and the United States should be tearing down tariff walls that we have and forging a closer tie. We should be promoting the principles of free trade among free nations. I reject the idea that we can afford to treat the current and very real problems we have between Canada and the United States as a permanent end to our relationship. They're not. We're always going to live next door to each other. We're always going to have friendly relations between peoples. I've just finished an incredible tour. Detroit, Houston, Austin, here to New York. Everywhere I go, people love Canadians. We have an incredible friendship. Our peoples love each other. And we live right next door to each other. We have shared border. We have the longest undefended border in the history of the world. And as you know, geography is permanent. No one can call a realtor and just move somewhere else. And the truth is, we wouldn't want to. This relationship has been a spectacular success over 2 centuries. My goal, therefore, is to rebuild that relationship, to promote free trade, to end U.S. tariffs on aluminum, autos, and lumber, to name a few. Let's forge a new tariff-free auto pact to protect North American production. Let's have a full exemption from Buy America so that Canadian construction companies can sell into American procurement markets. And let's relaunch the Keystone XL pipeline to deliver more affordable Canadian energy into American hands at good prices. I'm here today to restore and renew our friendship and to bring affordability, security, and strength to the peoples of both of our 2 separate countries. I'm here to pitch Americans on a simple proposition. Canada can help you solve your biggest challenges in America: affordability for your citizens and safety in a dangerous world. For example, Americans today more than ever are overpaying for food, fuel, and homes. Canada can help with all 3. We are home to the world's 4th biggest supply of oil, and we provide by far the most stable and reliable of all of the countries that you could buy from. For comparison, the other 3 in that top 4 are Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Take your pick. All of them are in the news, and not for good reasons right now. I was just in Houston the other day. I was at the Houston Tank Terminal, and I saw where the Keystone pipeline actually emerges from the ground. So I very playfully asked the engineer, what if I were to crawl into that pipeline and can keep crawling until my head surfaced somewhere? Where would I end up? They said, well, in the middle of rural Alberta, where it goes in the town of Hardisty. Incredible town. 600 people live there, and their tank farm handles $100 billion of oil. So in this town of 600 people, they handle what is equivalent of the GDP of many countries. just to illustrate the incredible genius of our trades workers and our engineers. But that oil then comes to Houston, where it is treated and shipped to the world. It is actually controlled out of a command center in downtown Calgary, even though it's in Houston. And not far away from there in Baytown, Texas, 2,000 workers refine and turn Canadian energy into asphalt, jet fuel, gasoline, and every other use. I just want to put this into perspective because it is true that Canada has a trade surplus with the United States of America for one reason, because we sell the United States an enormous quantity of underpriced natural resources, which you then feed into your industry and turn around at massive profits to your people. The $100 billion of oil that we sell the United States of America is converted into $350 billion of products that you consume or sell to the rest of the world. And the difference goes into the paychecks of your workers. 70% of our exports to the United States of America is not for end-use consumption, but for production and increased value that you add to those things. So in other words, we are not competing with you for production. Canadian workers are not replacing American workers in the supply chain. We are feeding into your supply chains, and you are massively increasing the value and turning that value into bigger paychecks, particularly for blue-collar, working-class Americans. And it is ironic that because we have not built up more infrastructure east-west in our own country, we're effectively using, your workers are able to use our resources for their paychecks. So you are big winners as a result of importing our resources. Now, if you look at what we could do with this relationship today, we could increase Canadian oil exports to the United States of America by 2 million barrels, which would allow you to bring down your gas prices and ultimately become less reliant on what happens over in the Middle East. Now, we can't obviously do it in time for this particular crisis. However, what about the next one? When is the best time to prepare for a crisis? 10 years ago. Well, we should be preparing now to make sure America has a reliable supply of oil for the medium and long term so that never again do Americans have to pay $5 a gallon for gas. An agreement, a renewed USMCA that includes permitting additional oil production and approving U.S. pipelines on the south side of the border could both create jobs for Americans but also reduce costs for your consumers. And as I said, while none of this can be done in the short term, we have to get moving now to prepare for the next term. And then there's trucks. The Ford F-Series has been the single greatest selling truck in the United States of America for 45 years. It has a military-grade aluminum shell for a body, one of its great features. That's the good news. The bad news is you simply cannot make enough aluminum in the States for those trucks. You don't have the bauxite or the affordable electricity necessary to turn bauxite into alumina. We do. We have enormous surpluses of aluminum. But the current tariff drives up the cost for Ford to make those trucks, which makes it harder for them to produce trucks made by America, and ultimately drives up the cost of those trucks for electricians in Ohio, miners in Appalachia, and energy workers in Texas. Get rid of that tariff and you lower the cost of trucks for working class Americans and you increase production of those vehicles. There's lumber. Your young people struggle to afford homes, particularly in cities like New York. 80% of your lumber imports for home building come from Canada. The 45% tariff on Canadian lumber increases housing costs by making it more expensive to build. Eliminating this Biden-era tariff would make home building more affordable, which means more jobs for your carpenters and more homes for your youth. There are countless other goods and services Canadians can profit from delivering to you tariff-free that will make life more affordable for American consumers and businesses. Simply put, a strong Canada is vital for your economic interests, but but also for your security interests. Obviously, we control the biggest airspace and seas and landmass in the hemisphere. We are the only thing between you and Russia. Forget that sometimes. I mean, other than Santa Claus, he's up there too. But he's not going to protect you from the Russians. There's unanimous consensus that Canada needs to massively build up its military. The Canadian Armed Forces must be capable of protecting every square inch of seas, skies, and soil. We understand we have to do more. That will not only secure us, but it will keep your northern flank secure. What is more? We have the materials of modern warfare. For example, Canada produces 10 of the 12 NATO-defined defense critical minerals that are going to be necessary to fight a future war. Aluminum that strengthens aircraft and armored vehicles. Gallium that powers semiconductors and radar systems. Germanium, which enables night vision technology. Graphite is essential for batteries. We also have lithium for the same purpose. Tungsten goes into armor-piercing ammunition and also into medical imaging equipment. Cobalt brings heat-resistant alloys that you put in your fighter jets so that they can operate under incredible stress. Canada is actually the global producer of more than 60 minerals and metals and holds the largest deposits of high-grade uranium, which you will need for nuclear power and other uses. And of course, we have the biggest supply of potash, which is one of the 3 top ingredients for fertilizer so that you can eat. No modern economy or military functions without secure energy and minerals. And that's why I have proposed that Canada establish a strategic minerals and energy reserve that would be available to our tariff-free allies, giving preferred access to those countries that work with us. It will give us increased leverage in these forthcoming negotiations, and it will keep both of our countries secure if, God forbid, we ever have to fight a common enemy. Access to this reserve could be a key part of the renewed USMCA following this summer's review. Canada is also going to be spending hundreds of billions of dollars on an unprecedented buildup of our armed forces to rebuild our capabilities. We believe that the degree to which we make those purchases from our American friends should be directly proportional to the degree we get access to free trade in the forthcoming review of the USMCA. Ma vision pour le Canada est très simple. Je veux construire un Canada plus fort et plus abordable pour rétablir notre amitié avec les États-Unis et faire la promotion du libre-échange avec nos alliés historiques. C'est comme ça qu'on va défendre nos valeurs et assurer notre sécurité. That is my vision for a stronger Canada, a renewed friendship with the United States, a world in which free trade between free markets works for free people, a bulwark against the alternative vision promoted by unfree powers, nations that do not share our values or our interests. Now, many of you will have recognized the quote I used of John F. Kennedy not long ago, that geography, history, economics, and necessity have bound us together. But what you might not know about that speech is that he actually spoke much more frankly about the challenges in that relationship, about its inevitable stresses and tensions, but that those things could be overcome with a common vision and pursuit. The pursuit of freedom, of individual liberty, of democracy, provides us with the perspective to work through our many differences. So let me close by quoting the prescient words of JFK that he gave to our House of Commons in 1961. We are bound to have our differences and disappointments, and we are equally bound to bring them out into the open, to settle them where they can be settled, and to respect each other's views when they cannot be settled. Thus, ours is the unity of equal and independent nations, co-tenants of the same continent, heirs of the same legacy, and fully sovereign associates in the same historic endeavor to preserve freedom for ourselves and all who wish it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remarks. We are pleased to be joined by Catherine Lubier, who flew in this morning from California to be with us. Catherine served as a senior advisor to Prime Minister Stephen Harper and most recently represented the province of Quebec here in New York City, where she played a central role in advancing major cross-border energy and trade initiatives. At present, she advises global companies on public policy, governance, and Canada-U.S. relations. We're going to turn to Catherine to engage Mr. Poilievre in a fireside chat. So we're just going to set that up very quickly.
All right, good evening, everyone. Is this working? This is working? All right. So, Pierre, thank you for being here in New York City.
Thank you. Great to be back. Thank you.
And, you know, I'm always amazed at the number of Canadians in New York City that do extraordinary work all over the C-suite. There's a lot of them tonight in the room, so I want to say hello to everyone. You know, and you've named a few things that, well, a lot of things that we're doing together. Here in New York City, when I was a diplomat, I mean, I could witness, you know, roads being done with cement and asphalt from Canada. I'm very proud that the hydro project, you know, the largest binational energy project that we have, is going to be completed in the spring. And so energy will start flowing on that new line, which is an engineering work that's been going on for I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, all the way to Astoria, Queens in New York, and we'll start powering New York. So this is the kind of collaboration that we've been working on. My friend, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, has been conducting the Metropolitan Opera for over a decade, a guy from Montreal. So it makes me extremely proud when I see all of that between Canada, but in particular Quebec and New York. Now, you talked about it, there is headwinds in the relationship. And I, for one, think it's extremely important to engage with Americans right now. We need to be out here, and I really want to give you immense credit for being in Michigan, for being in Texas yesterday, and for being with us in New York today. So thank you for being here, and welcome to New York City again. So a lot of people in the room haven't had a chance to meet with you yet. You've talked about the economy and trade. Can you elaborate a little bit on your philosophy and your principles with regards to economy and trade?
Well, going back to first principles, at the risk of being repetitious, I genuinely do believe in Adam Smith's vision of free enterprise, that voluntary exchange is the single greatest source of economic well-being, that this means, in practical terms, very small government, low taxes, limited regulatory barriers, extremely fast permitting, and for the government to focus on doing a few things right rather than doing a lot of things poorly. Narrowly focused on national defense, borders, basic infrastructure, a safety net for people who can't provide for themselves, but then get out of the way of workers, entrepreneurs, and consumers to let them exchange with one another and get better off. In Canada, this means the areas where this is most practically needed is in natural resources and home building. We should be the fastest place on earth to get a permit to dig a mine, a well, build a pipeline, expand a port, or build a home so that our young people can afford a place to live. Those are just some of the examples of how this plays out. But very clearly, what we see when we look around the world is the countries that have the most economic freedom, have the highest standard of living, the least poverty, the best life expectancy, all of the best social conditions. They are all in places with free enterprise. So my purpose is to make Canada the freest economy in the world.
So we heard Prime Minister Carney recently lay out a vision and a partnership with China. So when you think about the strains in the relationship of the United States, and I think that's partly why he did that, what are the differences that you can think about in trade between China and, say, the United States?
Well, I'm not going to disparage my prime minister on foreign turf, so I won't counter his position here. There'll be plenty of time for that in the House of Commons. Please tune in at 2:15 Monday through Thursday for question period, and we'll try to put on a good show. So have your popcorn ready. But here, I would just say, look, we trade. This is not a criticism of the prime minister. It's just my view. You've asked me to compare the Chinese market with the American market. We've got to trade and talk with China, and we have to engage with that country. As I said, it's a brilliant civilization and an incredibly industrious people. But there is no getting away from the fact that we sell 20 times as much to the United States as we sell to China. We live right next door. The United States, American capitalism is the most powerful force in the history of economics. The American military is by far the most powerful military in the history of armaments. And of course, the American people are our friends. So our alliance, our historic alliance with the United States is far more important and far more immediate, and we must do everything we can to preserve it.
And you've talked about the trade. We have over 60% of trade with the U.S. now, and we do have over 50 free trade agreements with the world. Yes. 3/4 of the GDP. It is important to diversify as well, but it's a fraction of what we can achieve by keeping our relationship with the U.S. and even expand it. How do you see the diversification versus engaging and keeping trade with the U.S.?
Well, I think we can do both. I think the two are additive. One does not replace the other. When we increase exports overseas, it's not to subtract them from the United States, it's to add to them. Even if we were to somehow amazingly manage to replace all of our exports to the United States with some other country, we would be no further ahead. We would be where we are right now. And of course, that could never even happen. The things that we need to do to diversify overseas are principally things that we need to do at home. As you said, we already have 50 free trade agreements. The challenge is not that other countries won't let our products in, it's that we have a hard time getting them out. Give you one example, or two examples very quickly. One new pipeline to Canada's west coast, would allow for more overseas exports than we currently do all year with China. So one pipeline would be more economically important than our entire export to the U.S. to China. I'll give you another example. I was just in North Germany the other day. They were relying almost exclusively on the Russians for their gas. Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. By May, they had a permit for a brand new import terminal. By Christmas of that year, they had completed that terminal and were accepting their first shipments. 95% of that natural gas comes from the United States of America, even though Canada has half the shipping time to Europe, and it's 25% cheaper to liquefy in Canada because of our cold weather doing a lot of the work for us. Why were the ships that I looked out at sea and saw bringing the gas in, why was that coming from the U.S. Gulf Coast, from Louisiana and Texas, and not from Atlantic Canada? Because we don't have any LNG plants in Atlantic Canada today. And we don't have them because we don't have the permits. So our biggest obstacle to diversifying trade are restrictions we impose on ourselves. But the good news is we can remove those restrictions and we can reach the world with our abundant resources.
So let me ask you this: if you, how could you make the case to President Trump on expanding trade and free trade with Canada? In other words, tell us what would your elevator pitch, if I may, would be.
Well, I don't even need an elevator. One word: leverage. We need leverage in these negotiations, and the president said so himself in his book, The Art of the Deal. The most important thing in trade, in a negotiation, is leverage. We need to use the leverage we have in Canada. We are your second biggest customer. We are your biggest external supplier of energy and raw materials. We have 10 of the 12 NATO-defined defense minerals that are necessary for national security in the 21st century. We are responsible for the biggest share of airspace, water, and land in the entire hemisphere, which means that we are vital to the national security of the United States, and we are about to carry out the biggest single military buildup in our country's history, which will mean lots of procurement opportunities for firms in partner countries. I want to bundle all of that up as in one word and say that is our leverage. We can make America more affordable, safer, and richer if we have tariff-free trade between our two separate countries, and both of us will win.
Yeah. No, and you talked about leverage, and you described your idea of creating a reserve of resources that you can share, and I want to also give a little bit of context on Canada, and you know this well, but Canada has a massive exodus of foreign direct investment. We haven't been able to catch up to productivity in companies. Unemployment is high. It's even higher in youth. Our debt and our deficit have nearly doubled. You've been out there with Canadians. You've listened to them. You have offered them the promise of Canada, to bring back the promise of Canada. And you know how Canada is in a situation right now where we don't really have a choice but to develop our resources. So when you talk about leverage, with resources, are there any other industries that you see that we can develop and take down the barriers, accelerate permits to do more business with the United States and have this leverage with the administration as well in our negotiations?
Well, listen, I would focus on energy across the board. Your home province, it's hydroelectricity with the prodigious rivers of La Belle Province. In my home province, it's oil and gas. We have by far the greatest supply of natural resources per capita of any country on earth, far more than we could ever use. For context, we have enough natural gas in Canada alone to supply the world with all of its needs for 200 years. That is to say, if every other country on earth ceased to produce natural gas, we could supply the world for the next 2 centuries with today's technology. That's just one subsector. So now we need to unblock and unlock those resources. That will boost our dollar and our purchasing power so that life is affordable for our people. It will make us a geostrategic superpower in the modern economic and security environment. And it will help our allies power their economies as well.
And it's difficult because, even the pension funds in Canada are largely invested in the U.S. now. So what do you do to attract again foreign direct investment in Canada? Because, this is very worrisome fundamentals that we're looking at for our economy in Canada.
So I think we should look at some of the success stories we have in our nation. I mentioned the town of Hardisty, which has 600 people and $100 billion of oil go through its tank farm. Why Hardisty? Why did they set up there? Because the town has 1 week permitting. If you want a permit to build anything, a house or a tank filled with oil and gas, it takes 1 week to get that permit. And there's obviously, they have to meet all the same safety standards and all of the same environmental standards. So it's not safe. The people enjoy excellent drinking water. They can swim in the local lake. It's a beautifully safe and pristine place. But they can do it with 1 week permits. And when I actually called the municipal district, and I said, I'd like to make a video about this achievement. Is there someone there who can talk to me about it? They said, no. The guy who stamps the permits is a farmer, and he's busy. He doesn't have time to have conversations. If you want to get a permit, drop off your application, and we'll get back to you later in the week. They have no bureaucracy. They just get out of the way. Yes, they protect nature and the environment, but they get it done. Another example is the Great Haisla people in northwestern British Columbia, who signed a deal to allow LNG Canada, a $40 billion LNG export terminal, the only one we have on any coast in Canada, that will basically end poverty in their Indigenous community, but also allow us to sell our natural gas in Asia, displacing dirtier coal-fired plants. These are the kinds of success stories that we have to build on by looking how local leaders who've delivered permits, who've unlocked prosperity, so that we can do that at a national level.
Thank you. Well, we've covered a lot of topics. Is there a message you want to leave with our American friends, our distinguished friends? Thank you for being here today. You've been in the U.S. for what, a few days, few weeks now. Is there something you want to leave them with tonight?
Well, I want to thank you for the welcome. It's been just so wonderful for Anna and I to be in America. The people are so friendly everywhere we go. The people love Canada. And it just reminded me that this is a relationship that will overcome the present day disagreements, that our children and grandchildren will grow up in two different countries that share a long-standing bond. It has been centuries old now that we have worked together, that we have kept our continent safe and made it one of the most prosperous places in the history of the world. So let's build on that incredible success. Let's resolve our differences and march forward to a shared partnership between our two countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for stopping by in New York City. Thank you to the FPA for tonight, and everybody can join us for a reception in the back. Thank you very much.